Hello sociologists, and welcome to some lessons on our case study that we're doing for the ethnicity topic. We're going to be looking at Sudanese Australians. That's what we voted on. It's going to be 5 lessons on that. Now before we go ahead, I just want to make a few points. I've gathered all this material myself from had a few quick chats to some people, but mostly this is all just stuff off the internet. So I highly recommend, if you get a spare moment, to go and do a little bit of delving yourself. Some of the extra reading that's in the bonus homework is really important. I've created a big 15 pages of notes, which there's a link to at the end, and these lessons kind of give you a summary of the main 5 things from that are in the VCE study design. Okay, so our first lesson is group identity. So our learning goals today are: you're going to know some Sudanese history, you're going to know the migration history of Sudanese Australians, and you're going to know the difference between Sudan and South Sudan. Now a lot of the information that you're going to hear here kind of conflates, puts together stuff about Sudanese and South Sudanese migrants to Australia. They are not the same group. However, because South Sudan only separated from Sudan as a country in 2011, a lot of the migrants to Australia moved over here before that split happened. So there are some people whose actual home back in Africa would now be considered South Sudan, but they themselves might consider themselves Sudanese because there was no country called South Sudan before 2011 when they came over here. And a lot of the statistics about these two groups are a little bit muddied because some people will call themselves South Sudanese and other people will call themselves Sudanese. So there's no perfect dividing line there. But in any answers that you're giving, I think it's really important that you acknowledge that you know that there is a difference between the two countries and a difference between the two migrant groups. And the fourth thing, you're going to know some demographics of Sudanese Australians. So sometimes if I say Sudanese Australians, I might be referring to Sudanese and South Sudanese, unless I specifically say Sudan versus South Sudan, and that should be obvious in the coming slides. Okay, a little bit of background in Africa. So Sudan was a British colony and it declared independence from Britain in 1956. Heaps of Britain's imperial possessions all got independence from Britain in the 1950s, around just after World War II. So a little bit of history. So straight during, it was 1 year into the first civil war that they declared independence from Britain. It was a huge civil war, lasted for 17 years. Atrocities occurred during that civil war, and then there was a second civil war from 1983 to 2005. So if you have a look at that, in the 50 years from 1955 to 2005, 40 of those 50 years, Sudan was in the middle of a civil war, and of course there was more conflict after 2005 as well. It split into Sudan and South Sudan in 2011. In 2011, the South Sudan was the world's newest country. However, I would like to make a little point about that. There is a belief in Australian society that because Sudanese migrants came from a country that was ravaged by war, famine and drought, that these people are somehow damaged. That's a really fatalistic way of looking at it, and I think that it undermines some of the amazing things that refugees and migrants from Sudan and South Sudan have been able to achieve since they got here. Also, Sudanese youth, which you have heard, maybe you've heard about in the last 5 years when they talk about South Sudanese or Sudanese gangs or crime. A lot of these youth were not born in Sudan, or maybe have only had any experience in Africa from being in refugee camps and did not experience war directly themselves and were not child soldiers. Okay, so we don't want to make the mistake that some people in Australian society do of writing off Sudanese people purely because of this period in their history, and we're not going to do that. Unfortunately, Sudan hasn't just experienced 40 out of 50 years of civil war. It's been ravaged by drought and famine for decades. Okay, this is a super brief timeline of Sudanese history. So in 1820, I'm sorry, It's not very good quality here, but I'll see if I can read it out for you. In 1820, Sudan was conquered by Turkey and Egypt. That should say 1955, not 1995. Down here, that is a mistake. That should be a 5. Yeah, there was a revolt, civil war began. Sudan gained its independence in 1956. National government was formed in 1964. And so on. That slide's not that great because you can't read half of it. Anyway. So, migration to Australia. Before 1970, there wasn't that many Sudanese people that migrated to Australia, and if they did, it was mostly for education. For example, to go to university. Now, in modern times, 98% of refugees from Sudan and South Sudan come via Australia's humanitarian program. So, large-scale migration from Sudan and South Sudan has been recent, only sort of in about the last 15 years or so. And some, in fact, once the Second Civil War ended in 2005, a lot of those people who only came over here to escape the Civil War actually returned home. So South Sudanese migrant levels have been going up, but Sudanese migrant levels from the 2011 to 2016 census have in fact been going down. Right, this graph's a bit crappy because it doesn't actually show you what the axes represent, but this is migration from Sudan and South Sudan to Australia, and you'll notice that it peaks here. Yeah. And actually there's not that much migration from Sudan at the moment. It basically peaked at the end of the Second Civil War. Here's another graph looking at a similar thing. This is showing you where those migrants have gone. Mostly New South Wales and Victoria. And that's primarily because there already are existing Sudanese communities in those areas. If you're from a vulnerable place and you go to a new country, obviously you're going to want to live near communities that are from the place that you're from. Choice. Right, a slide on the difference between Sudan and South Sudan. So don't confuse the two. They often have very different migration stories. So northern groups, for example, some Christians have been coming since independence in the 1950s. The north is more one of the things that caused the rift between Sudan and South Sudan was religious differences. In general, Sudan is Muslim and South Sudan is Christian. It's a little bit of a simplification, but in general that's roughly how it is. So Sudanese Arab Muslims who have migrated to Australia have a stronger national sentiment than those from South Sudan. And then there was the Darfur genocide, which happened in Western Sudan, and a lot of people came to Australia as refugees because of that genocide. South groups, that's mostly from 2003 to 2006, as we saw on that last graph. There's often no distinction made between North Sudan or just Sudan and South Sudan in Australia. Because as I've mentioned in my introduction, many South Sudanese migrated here before there was such a country. And some of the census data is confused and is probably wrong. But people decide their own ethnicity. So if on a census a person says that they're Sudanese, when they might have been born in what is now classified as South Sudan, that's completely up to them. So I thought it might be a good idea for us to see where Sudan and South Sudan are. Here we are in sleepy old Melbourne, and now we're going to use the power of Google Earth Pro to fly all the way across the world to Sudan. There we go, there's Sudan there. So Sudan. Now, before 2011, when these two countries split, Sudan and South Sudan were one country. They were the biggest country in Africa. That has now passed to Algeria because Sudan split up into two countries. So here we've got Sudan, or you might sometimes hear it called North Sudan. Most of the population of Sudan runs along the Nile River here where my hand is moving. That's because it's the Nile River, it's fertile, it's got good soil for farming so people can live there, with its capital Khartoum. You got South Sudan here, much greener as you might notice, and then its capital right down there, Juba. And then you've got this contested area, Abyei. I've actually got a friend who's a peace academic who often travels to this area, and he says that it's often changing hands between the two countries. So there you go, that is Sudan. Some demographics of these groups. So Sudanese migrants make up 0.3% of Victorians. The total number, as mentioned, in fact went down from 2011 to 2016. South Sudanese migrants make up 0.2% of Victorians. That total doubled between the last two censuses. So you would assume that the number of South Sudanese migrants is going to overtake the number of Sudanese migrants in the future. These two groups put together were the fastest growing migrant group to Australia from 1996 to 2005. That's dropped off dramatically since then. Doesn't mean it's the biggest migrant group, it just means that it was the fastest growing migrant group, so its numbers as a percentage were going up. In the 2016 census, there were 19,049 Sudanese migrants, 4,825 South Sudanese migrants. Melbourne was the most common home for these migrants. They're younger than the average population. The average age for Sudanese migrants is just 31, and in Australia it's 38. The average age for people from more traditional societies is generally younger. Countries that are not as industrialized have larger families and lower life expectancy, so they have lots of babies but die earlier, whereas the more advanced economies have less children but they live for longer. And they're poorer, much poorer than the average Australian. So this is household income per week. Sudanese migrants take in $377 a week versus other Australians, $688 a week. So there's quite a big difference there. Yeah. So when we do discuss crime in a future lesson, one thing that I would like to point out is that there's unlimited research that makes the point that the number one cause of crime is poverty. Okay, look at that. That's Sudanese migrants are basically raking in half the amount of money that other Australians are. Okay, we're going to look at some graphs here. Again, this might conflate South Sudanese and Sudanese groups, but if you have a look there, Arabic is spoken as a language at home. Arabic would be Sudanese people. Dinka is the main ethnic group of South Sudan, and then English, Tingrinya, and other languages. So just you think about that. If you're not speaking English as the main language by your parents at home, then think about the educational disadvantage that you're going to have when you go to school. The main religions, and this is both Sudanese and South Sudanese put together, so Islam and various Christian groups there. Other religion might be animism. Animism is a traditional form of religion where you believe that everything has a soul, so animals and natural features of the landscape. Here we can see the level of education of the total Australian population versus Sudanese born. So the obvious interpretation of that is that Sudanese are less likely to be educated than other Australians. Just briefly want to talk about one famous Sudanese Australian, Yasmin Abdel Magied, probably pronouncing that wrong, sorry about that. She is a media presenter and writer, and the reason that I mention her is because she's an interesting case study within our case study to look at how the dominant Australian culture responds to minorities. On Anzac Day in 2017, she put up a Facebook post, and I'm going to show you that post in a minute. There was a big controversy about it. She was heavily criticised. She received death threats, and she left Australia 3 months later, moved to London, and as far as I know, she has never moved back to Australia. And I'll show you them in a second. Other famous Sudanese Australians, AFL and basketball players. Okay, so on Anzac Day 2017, Yasmin put up this post. Lest we forget, And she's drawing attention to the fact that we shouldn't just forget the deaths of Australian and other soldiers in World War One during the Gallipoli campaign. We should also not forget Manus and Nauru. Manus and Nauru are places where the Australian government has housed what they call illegal migrants offshore for processing, which a lot of Australians find, which Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have all said goes against Australia's, is really bad for Australia's human rights record. And lest we forget, let's not forget about the civil war in Syria, and let's not forget about what's going on in Palestine, which is the Israelis and the Palestinians having an ongoing conflict there, right? So she was making a point. She was saying, yes, lest we forget, but there are other hotspots. She was heavily criticised for this, very, very criticised. A few hours later, she took this post down and changed it to just lest we forget and put this little apology there. It was brought to my attention my last post was disrespectful, and for that I apologise unreservedly. But the damage had been done. Yeah, you got to understand how fundamental the Anzac myth is to Australian culture, that it caused this outrage. Now, I must admit, you could argue that I'm delving a little bit into opinion here, because there are obviously two sides to every debate. However, I personally didn't feel that her drawing attention to other hotspots going on was something worthy of death threats and having to have to leave the country forever. Obviously, other opinions are valid as well. Here's an example of a comment response she received on Twitter. You should be ashamed of yourself for hijacking Remembrance Day for your political motives, I think. Yeah. Oh, yeah, this is a response to something that she said on Remembrance Day, yeah. So, this means that your last apology for disrespecting Anzac Day was a lie to the entire nation. Yes. Anyway, and then here's an article from the Herald Sun. Two-finger salute, I think we all know what that means. This was after she made that tweet. Yep. So, social media, pretty powerful. One tweet, taken down. A few hours later, death threats. You left the country forever. And we see Andrew Bolt making way more inflammatory comments like that every day on his show. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Okay, there's been quite a bit of content today, so the activity is going to be fairly simple. I simply want you to Google Sudanese culture and click on images, and I just want you to slowly scroll through what you can see there for a few minutes so you can kind of get an idea of all the different things that you're going to see in the coming lessons about Sudanese culture. The video today is about Sudanese culture. We've got a couple. Here's the first one.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Amina. So one of the first videos I ever made on this channel was 13 things that most people don't know about Sudan. So for today, I'm going to be following up on that video, but I'm going to focus mostly on culture, which is my favorite. If you didn't watch the first video, I'll link it down below. That covered more so statistics, geography, flag, all of that. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started. Sudan is so diverse, so there's no way I can name every single different culture, tradition that we have, but I will do my best to generalize some of the main ones. So the first thing that you guys should know about Sudanese people is the majority of Sudanese people are very laid back. In general, Sudanese culture is extremely laid back. If you go to Sudan, that's something you'll definitely notice, to the point where sometimes things can be a little bit too laid back and things happen slowly, but that's definitely something that the majority of Sudanese people share. They are extremely hospitable. When I say extremely hospitable, I mean beyond anything that you can imagine, beyond anything that exists in the Western society. The culture basically has this generous hospitality ingrained in it. For example, if somebody were to come over to your house, it doesn't matter if it's a neighbor, if it's a friend, if it's a family member, you must first of all greet them, invite them inside, inside, and you must serve them with some sort of drink and food. So you can do like water, a juice, tea or coffee, and you can do usually like candy, something small. But if they're staying for more than a few hours, then you definitely have to serve them food as well. That is very normal in Sudan. The hospitality is on point. They're some of the nicest people. I said they, I'm one of them. So these people are some of the nicest people in this world, and I'm not just saying that because I'm Sudanese. A lot of people have said that as well. So the next thing, let's talk about what I am wearing. So this is called the tobe in Sudan. This is the traditional clothing that a lot of women do wear. I'm not wearing this correctly. You do have to put this back part above your head. However, this is a lot harder than it looks. I'm not a master of the tobe. Put this on and to be able to walk and stuff, it takes some experience. But the tobes are really, really beautiful in Sudan. They come in so many different colors, textures. Most of the time you will find married women wearing the tobe or older women. This is very traditional, and I believe that this is unique to Sudan as well. I have not seen any other country that wears the tobe the same exact way that Sudanese women do. I might be wrong. Let me know down below. Now, as for the men, the traditional clothing, a lot of the time what you'll see men wear is called a jalabiya, which is this white clothing. It is pretty baggy and it's very light because in Sudan it's very, very hot. It comes with these pants, just plain white pants, and then this part, probably the most important. Can't really see it on camera because it's gonna be so big. So yeah. Oh my god, this still smells like Sudan. It smells so good. Anyways, this is like a traditional jalabiya. It's long sleeve and then it's also long. It goes almost all the way to the ground. The men, they wear both of these together. That's one of the traditional clothing. One of the traditional clothing, because there is more than that. The next thing that you will definitely find in Sudan that I think is probably surprising, we use beds a lot in Sudan. When I say beds, I don't just mean for sleeping. We use beds as seating areas as well. You'll find beds like all over. Even in the living room, you might find like 2 or 3. Even outside, before you enter the house, you'll find beds kind of along. There's something called a hosh in Sudan, which most houses have. It's basically the outside area before you enter into the house. And it's kind of, you could think of it like as a big patio. On that hosh, you'll usually find like 2 to 3 beds where people sit, talk, whatever. And then at night, one of the cool things is because the weather is so hot, at night the weather is the perfect temperature where a lot of people sleep outside on the hosh at night. I was kind of a scaredy cat when I was in Sudan, but I tried it one time and it was pretty amazing. You get that fresh air in your face, so that was great, but I was kind of scared. So when it comes to music in Sudan, just like the people, Sudanese music for the most part is very laid back. There's not very many fast songs, and when I say fast songs, I mean get up and party and dance type of music. It matches the vibe of the Sudanese people. Very laid back, very chill, very calming, very nice too. Another thing, when it comes like with music, party celebrations, for weddings usually, you'll hear this like sound that women make to celebrate. I'm not gonna even attempt to do it. I think I could do it actually a little bit, but I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna insert a little clip of how that sounds. Might be alarming for people if you've never heard that before, but yeah, it's okay, nothing's going on. That's the traditional customary way to like celebrate. Next thing I'm going to talk about is gold. So in Sudan, actually, the jewelry of choice is gold. I don't know, I'm rolling up my sleeves because I do not have on gold from Sudan. I wish I did, but Sudan has gold, so the women there, oh my god, have some of the most beautiful gold jewelry you will ever see, especially when they get married. They they have their arms full of gold bracelets here and their neck. When I say gold, I'm not talking about 10 karat, 14 karat. I'm talking about real gold. 22 karat, 24 karat, 21 maybe is like the least. I don't think I've ever seen less than 21 karat in Sudan. Like, that's not even gold for Sudanese people. So definitely that yellow gold you'll find in Sudan. It's so beautiful. So next we have henna. So henna is basically like a temporary dye that people put on their skin in Sudan and on their hair, but mostly on their skin, and it'll fade away after a couple of weeks. So henna is found in a lot of places in the world, but what's unique in Sudan is that the henna is black. Yes, it is pitch black, so it shows up really nice on our skin because we're obviously darker, and the design of the henna in Sudan is so beautiful. Whenever I went to Sudan, every single time I would get my henna done for no reason, even if there was nothing, no occasion. Usually you get it done for a wedding or something like that. Even if there was no occasion, I get my henna done, and then before I leave to come back to the US, I get my henna done again. There's a little bit of difference. If you're married, you do like both of your hands and your feet. If you're not married, you kind of stick with your hands. You could tell the difference between a married woman's henna and a non-married woman's henna. And in Sudan, the men do henna as well, the married men, for their weddings. So they'll have henna on their hands and on their feet too. Alright, so when it comes to weddings, man, Sudanese weddings are some of the most intricate and detailed things that I've ever seen, and I'm not even gonna try to get to that in this video, but if you guys want me to do a dedicated video on everything that happens in a full-blown Sudanese wedding from start to finish, I will do that because it's so interesting. Anyways, let's keep moving on. So another thing that you will find very common in Sudan is called bakhur. This is what bakhur looks like. It's basically just oil perfume mixed with this wood, and then you light this on fire with charcoal, and it makes, oh my god, it smells so good. It makes your whole house smell so amazing. It's a little bit stronger than like candles for me. That's why I like to do bakhur better. And the smell is just like literally Sudan in a jar. Now, as far as food, typically everybody eats together. Sudan is very family oriented until this day. There's not really such an individualistic lifestyle. Everybody does things together, including eating food. So usually the food is served on one big silver plate, and then you have little dishes within this plate. You sit in a circle around the plate with your family, and you break off a piece of bread and you just eat. That's traditionally how a lot of people eat, and a lot of people still eat on the floor in Sudan. In Sudan, we eat a lot of bread. So of course we have our main bread, which just looks like your typical bread. But then we also have like kisra, which is made of sorghum flour. Kisra is this very thin bread, super thin. You can almost see through it, and we use that to eat mulahs. So mulahs are kind of like stews, and you have different flavors of mulahs made out of different things. So you could have like okra, you can have an okra mulah, or you can have a meat mulah, and then you use the kisra to kind of like use it as a spoon to kind of pick up the mulah and put it in your mouth and eat it. We eat with our hands too. Did I mention that? I mean, that's a given. The next bird that we have is called gurasa. So gurasa is the one that's very similar to Ethiopian or Eritrean injera. It looks the same. It's a little bit thicker than kisra, kind of the same thickness as injera. Then we also have asida, which is this interesting bread. It's kind of like made in the bowl, so it takes the shape of a bowl, and I don't really know how to describe it, so I'm just gonna put a picture so you guys can see what that looks like. That is more like mushy, but you use it the same way, just as a bread. So you have your mulahs, you have your breads, and food, of course. You cannot be Sudanese if you don't like food. That's a must. I think all Sudanese people love food. I think Sudan makes some of the best food in the world. Not being biased, I've literally tasted the best food in the world in Sudan. And juices are very popular too, freshly squeezed juices. And Sudan has something called karkade, which is hibiscus. I'm not gonna say anything because a lot of people are territorial over their karkade, but it is very pungent. Okay. And then also in Sudan, a lot of people drink tea. So yeah, tea and coffee is very common. However, I think more people are tea drinkers. I think we drink tea a lot. Tea with milk traditionally, and a lot of sugar. So anyways, that's it for this video. I don't want to make this too long. I'm just gonna go ahead and stop right here, even though I have a lot more. If you guys want a part 2, I'll keep going, talk about more culture and get a little bit more in depth. And also, I'm curious, you guys let me know down below if any of the things that I talked about are the exact same way in your country. Let me know down below. Let me know which country it is too. That's it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I will see you guys all in my next video. Bye!
Another video, I believe it's by the same woman, 13 facts about Sudanese culture. Take it away.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Amina. So today I'm gonna be sharing some interesting facts about Sudan. In case you guys don't know by now, I am 100% Sudanese. Here's the thing, like Sudan is not really talked about in the media. A lot of people don't really know a lot about Sudan. From Africans to Americans to Asians, like just when I talk to different people in general, it's so funny what they have to say about Sudan. So anyways, I thought I'd just make this video to share some facts about my country so that you all can learn a little bit more. Sudan is actually split into 2 countries now. There's Sudan and then there's South Sudan. Sudan just split recently in July of 2011. I'm still kind of in denial. I don't want to accept that we're 2 different countries now. Before Sudan split, Sudan was actually the largest country in Africa, and it was actually the 10th largest country in the world. So it is a pretty big country before it split. Primarily in Sudan, the people there are Muslim, and then in South Sudan, the people there are Christians. The name of the country Sudan derived from Bilad al-Sudan, which is Arabic, which actually means land of the blacks, or basically land of the black people. The official languages of Sudan are Arabic and English. A lot of people are always surprised to hear that. They're like, what? English? Sudan actually has a lot of tribes, and they still exist until today. So shout out to all my Denagla people out there. You have like Denagla, you have Jali, you have Shaiga. I know in the south you have Denka. I feel like there's so much more, but I don't even know. There's too many. The Independence Day of Sudan is January 1st. 1956. Also happens to be my mother's birthday. They were actually gonna name her Istiqlal, which means independence in Sudan, because she was born the day of Sudan's independence. There is actually 9 countries that border Sudan. I still don't even have them all memorized because it's just too much, but let me see if I can do it. So you have Egypt, Algeria, Kenya, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Uganda, that's 6, Chad, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the Central African Republic. So those are the 3 I was missing. Egypt has somehow claimed the title of the Nile River, when that's so not true. Like the Nile River runs in a lot of different countries in Northeast Africa. And actually, when you look at the map, the majority of the Nile River is in Sudan. There's actually a lot of ancient pyramids and ruins in Sudan. Matter of fact, we have even more in number than Egypt does. We have even more in number than Egypt does. We have even more in number than Egypt does. Egypt has more older ones, but in quantity, Sudan has more. You don't ever hear about Sudan's pyramids, but you always hear about Egypt's pyramids. This is no hate on Egypt. I know a lot of Egyptian people and they're super cool. They're always so nice. So the next thing is really cool. Sudan actually has one of the first and most active women's movements in Africa during like the 1960s/70s. Sudan had the first female parliamentarian. It also had the first female minister of health and the first female judge, cinematographer, football referee, army, and police officer. Good job, Sudan. This is the Sudan flag. This is what it looks like. It's green, red, white, and black, and each of these colors actually has a meaning. The red stands for Sudan's struggle for independence, the blood that was shed during that time to get independence, and a lot of other sacrifices and struggles that the country went through. The white is the opposite, and it basically stands for peace. The black stands for the color of the people, and the name, which is a Sudan, land of the black people, and the black is for the people. Obviously, I just said that. And then the green actually represents Islam, and it also represents agriculture. So yeah, that is my flag. Love you, Sudan. So anyways, that was it for this video. Hopefully you guys found that interesting and learned a thing or two about me and Sudan. And yeah, I will see you all in my next video. Bye! Because my whole life I've known it as one Sudan, the biggest country in the world. Like, not in the world, the biggest country in Africa. The Democratic Republic of Congo and the Central African Republic. You have Danagla, you have Jali, you have Shaiga, you have Rashaida, Jalin. Did I say that's a Jalin? Yeah, we have those. Shaiga. Basically, there's a lot of tribes. I don't even know them all. Action. I'm not even in focus. Around where the Nile splits. Oh my gosh, I cannot talk. So it's crazy because, yeah. Anyways, that's not really that interesting. And my feet are hurting, so we gotta change up our seating position.
Okay, your reflection activity, you're going to do a PMI, which is plus, minus, interesting. So you just got to come up with one short statement. What you think is a plus, what's a minus, and what is interesting on the topic of Sudanese group identity. Your homework. In your own words, I want you to write a paragraph, minimum of 200 words, answering this question. This is going to be the type of question you might have to answer on a SAC or in the exam. How do Sudanese Australians identify themselves as a group? And you should refer to the material from this lesson. The case study that's in the textbook is about Lebanese Australians, and you might be a good idea if you can't think of what types of things to write about. Have a look there. There's a whole page about how Lebanese Australians identify themselves as a group. Read that if you want to, and do the Sudanese Australian version of it. Some bonus homework. There's the Wikipedia page about Sudanese Australians. bit.ly/Sudan Wiki. Highly recommend you read that. It's not a long read. And the bonus homework that I'm going to put up for all of these case study slides is my full set of notes. bit.ly/Sudanese notes. Check that out. Thank you so much for partaking in this lesson. And as I always say, keep it real.